Good afternoon. My name is Teresa Lyons, and I want to welcome you to a webcast on coaching that leads to change. I will have a co-presenter later in the presentation, Cindy Bates from Wise County Public Schools, who's been part of a VCU Autism Technical Assistance Grant, and we've been working together as coaches in the division. So let's get started. Jim Knight is a researcher who looks at coaching and coaching practices, and he's been doing a lot of research for many years. And I found this quote in his book, and it's a quote that really kind of sheds light on why coaching is really important, and when we start any new initiative in divisions, why teachers are often resistant to change. And it says that teachers are often blamed for resisting change. In turn, teachers feeling slighted by their leaders tell each other this too will pass. Ultimately, both educational leaders and teachers get caught in a vicious cycle of blame and resistance. After interviewing more than 150 teachers across the U.S. about their views on professional development, I have concluded that teachers do not resist change so much as they resist poorly designed change initiatives. One of the biggest things I've seen as moving from an educator in the classroom to someone involved in professional development and technical assistance, I really see this quote come to life in the work that I've done, and that I've been at a point where I've done hundreds of presentations on many, many topics, and I can honestly say when I go into classrooms, into schools, that I don't see educators often implementing things as they were trained. And what Jim Knight is really saying, that is exactly the case, that what we're doing is we're bringing teachers after teachers and paraprofessionals and administrators to the table, and we're lecturing them about what needs to occur in the classrooms, but we never get to the practical application of that. And what teachers know is just wait it out. And I've heard teachers say it over and over, Teresa, this is great, I love the training you've done, but if I wait long enough, the division's going to move on past that interest, and I can go back to what I'm doing. And one of the biggest things I've seen, the biggest change in the quality of work and the quality of practice is really switching from a professional development perspective of training teachers to a professional development perspective of training teachers, and then immediately following up with coaching, modeling, and feedback. And that has made the biggest difference in the change in practices in teachers. So I want to share a little bit of research with you that was done by Joyce and Showers, and they presented this in 1982 at the annual conference for the National Staff Development Council. And I've done this slide at many conferences and shared this with many administrators, and I'm always amused when I show these percentages, because most people think that teachers can apply information learned in a workshop at a really, really high rate. And so I want to kind of share these percentages with you. I want you to kind of think about this as I go through this. When you go to a lecture that's an hour and a half and you just hear someone presenting, how much concept understanding, basically how much knowledge do you work away with? Skill attainment, how much do you actually have kind of the skills to be able to apply? And then classroom application, are you able actually to do what you learned about in the training? I want you to kind of think about those percentages and see if those percentages match up to what Joyce and Showers found out. When people walk away from an hour and a half lecture, they walk away with about 85% concept understanding. If I give you a quiz, average, most people are going to get 85%. Skill attainment, they probably can explain the skill and maybe demonstrate with a peer, but classroom application is only 10%. Actually making changes in the classroom, seeing students' outcomes, teacher outcomes change. Think about our professional development initiatives. Most of them are based on presentation and lecture. We all sit through days upon days before school starts of professional development opportunities where there's a national speaker or someone well-versed in education telling us about how to change our practice. Then that person goes away, and it's the hope that we've trained them and they're going to take and apply in the classroom. But what we've got to do is we've got to shift our focus and recognize that presentations, that model of professional development is not changing the practice of teachers. So now I want to beef up my presentation. I want to make it even better. So I decide that Teresa's going to model for you. Not runway model, but I'm going to show you how to actually apply the instructional strategy. So I might have a video, or I might do it with a student. So think about the percentages, and do your percentages match up with this? If I model for you, you're still going to walk away with about 85% of content knowledge. You might be able to, have the skill about 3% more, but still actually do it in the classroom from day to day with fluency is only going to occur about a rate of 10%. So now I go, I do the modeling, and I have you practice it, and during the training I give you some feedback, kind of low-risk feedback, because you're doing it with your peers of educators. What do you think the percentages are? Once again, 85% content knowledge. Skill attainment's a little bit higher, but classroom application is still only about 15%. We're still not getting the fluency of actual implementation of instructional strategies. So the research said this last area is where we do presentation, we do modeling, we do low-risk feedback, and then we actually go into your classrooms and we observe, we model, the administrators support us, we use data to provide feedback, and we engage in a coaching model. Concept understanding, still about 85-90%. Skill attainment, 90%. The number that changes is classroom application goes from 10-15% to 80%. This is the only way we are going to drive changes in our classrooms when we move from just a PD model to a PD model plus coaching. And I will say in the work that I've been doing in school systems through an embedded technical assistance model, the change that I'm seeing is easily as a result of the intensive planning, support, and coaching that we're providing teachers on a monthly basis. All right, so let's talk about what coaching is. The goal of coaching is really to develop self-directed educators. We're looking for autonomous teachers that really can take responsibility for their students' learning, that they are aware of their own behavior and thinking, that they use data to determine effects on learning, and they adjust their instruction based on new information. In a training, all I can do is present content, but I really can't get in and see your practice and then really help you think about your practice through creative question asking clarifying statements, paraphrasing what I'm seeing in the classroom. Through a dialogue between two individuals, new information comes to the surface that adjusts my practice. Coaching really brings that to light. The focus of coaching is really a formative assessment model. It really is an ongoing cycle of plan, teach, reflect, and apply. The first thing teachers have to do is really plan their lessons. They really got to be strategically thinking about the work that's involved. Coaching is a planning relationship. We can co-plan together. The teacher needs to then teach the lesson. And one of the things that does not happen in education is we move on to the next lesson. We really got to stop and reflect on what we're doing. Did the students acquire the skills? Did I give enough support, enough prompts, enough scaffolds so the student was able to actually use the lesson? Then did I reduce the scaffolds, prompts, so that the student can then stand on their own and use it? And then as I reflect and decide on those things I need to change, do I go back and then change my instruction and apply those things? And when we think about formative assessment, we're thinking about improving performance and effectiveness. We are such a heavy assessment, accountability system, and the accountability that we're required really drives our instruction related to content. But what we need to do is look at our instructional strategies. How are we approaching our students? What technology we're using? What behavioral principles are we applying? Are we using reinforcement appropriately? Are we using prompts appropriately? Coaching really drives you to those really nuanced instructional strategies that our SOL assessments and our other normative assessments do not provide for us. Coaching really gets to the heart of the matter in teaching. Coaching involves, and formative assessment involves, a kind of model of questioning, summarizing, recall, goal setting, baseline, and data. What I want to tell you is on the web board, or actually on the webcast page underneath the PowerPoint, you will have several documents. One of them will be a document that gives you some questions, kind of some questions and then suggestion stems about how to ask some questions when you're coaching. Because coaching should be a non-threatening conversation. So one of the some of the questions are things like, let's think of a good question here. As we're talking about strategies, I might ask them, how might that look in your classroom? Rather than my saying, hey, when I was a teacher, this is what I did in my classroom, because that becomes a threatening experience. But through simple question stems, I keep it on that coaching, collegial relationship where both of us are equals, we're dialogue, we're working together. So that is a resource that will be available for you. I've kind of italicized that goal setting there for a very particular reason. Many coaching models, when you go in and establish a coaching relationship, you go in and you observe a teacher and you work with a teacher, typically around the goals that they set that they want to change in their classroom. One of the things that I found with the technical assistance model is when we look at data, and we're going to get to some of the data here in a little bit, but as a division, what was established was goals for the division. And what we did is we brought in the teachers and we worked with them to kind of see where their division's assessment data was and then what they were seeing in their own classrooms. And we came up with common goals. And the coaching for the division as a whole was around the common goals rather than individual teacher practice. And really what that created was a community of practice across many, many avenues, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit more. But we had everybody working towards the same end. Rather than us going in a classroom and working on only that which was important to the teacher, we still work on that which is important to the teacher, but we work on those division goals of data, assessment, graphing, analyzing data, goal writing, classroom arrangement, picture schedules, good assessment. All the things were important to a division we worked on with everybody. And then kind of baseline and data was a part of that. So when you think about a really, really good coach, I know I worked at Virginia Tech for a while, so the coach there was Frank Beamer, and he was a fantastic coach. I think about the coaches when I was in college, and one of my most favorite coaches and the coach that made me a better softball player was Coach Gary Smith. And when I think about coaching, I think back at him, and I think about what qualities did he bring out that made me want to be a better softball player, a better teammate, a better athlete. And every single word on this list really describes him. He was an excellent teacher. He didn't yell at me. It wasn't threatening. He figured out ways when I didn't know how to perform something to help me to perform it better. He was extremely kind-hearted. He opened up his life, his world, his family. We knew his family. It really was a family experience. He was very, very respectful of us. He didn't treat us like dirt. He treated us with great respect. He saw us as human beings. He was very patient, and he had to be very patient with me as a softball player. Very compassionate. He was honest. He didn't beat around the bush. He just told me what I needed to fix and then helped me fix it. He had extremely high expectations for me. He saw me as a fantastic athlete, where as a freshman, I was a struggling athlete. And in 4 years, he brought me to a level that was beyond what I could expected because he worked very, very extensively with me. He provided affirmative and honest feedback, and then he saw something special in me that helped me to achieve and become a better softball player. It is my goal, and it should be our goal in a coaching relationship, that we really this is who we are. This is what teachers see. If a coaching is a threatening relationship, change will not occur. Coaches need to see you first as a really good teacher. You have to know your practice, and not just know your practice, you need to be able to talk about your practice. You need to be able to model your practice. One of the things I tell the coaches that I work with, I think coaches is one of the most vulnerable experiences as an educator, because you are putting yourself out there in a very real way for people to see you do practice, talk about your practice, see your own mistakes, and then see how you work through your mistakes. I think that's what makes a really, really good coach, and I think that really aligns with this perspective from Jim Knight's book on instructional coaching. All right, so Jim Knight talks about the partnership philosophy, and I'm just going to go through this really, really quickly, but you will have another supporting document underneath the PowerPoint that goes through great detail on these 7 principles. But in order to work as a coach, you really need to engage in an equal partnership. When I come to a coaching team, I should not be taking over the coaching conversation. It is really about pulling from the teacher what they see related to their practice. We should be on equal ground. Yes, I may bring to the table more experience with autism, but my goal is to bring from the teacher the experience they have and help them to apply it within their setting. Choice. It is a choice to be a part of that partnership. It's a choice to come to the table and have a conversation. I need to make myself so motivating and so engaging that they want to come to me, and it is a choice for them to be a part of that relationship. Voice, their voice needs to be heard. We need to engage in dialogue. Reflection is an important part of coaching. They need to be able to think about their own practice, come up with things that need to be changed, and make decisions about whether they actually want to make the change in practice. Praxis gets to the modeling. They've got to actually apply the things they're doing. And then reciprocity, that, it is a give and take. I need to be able to put information out there, and they need to be able to put information out there for me so that we're working together to really change the practice in their classrooms. So coaching, when you think about coaching, it really involves 4 things. The first is collaboration. Coaching is that give and take dialogue. when you sit down and you're working with a teacher, coaching really should start from a facilitative standpoint. It's about reflecting. It's about asking a teacher, what did you see in your practice? How did it go? What do you think went well? What do you think you can shift related to your practice? Then we get engaged in co-creating. The teacher might say, you know what? I really struggle with that lesson and I don't know how to make it better, or, I was trying to teach the student how to use a communication device and it just was falling apart. Can you help me figure it out? And then together we work together to figure out how to fix that lesson or how to make it stronger. The other thing is modeling, and I talked about that. I've got to be willing to jump in. As a coach, you've got to really put your fears aside and struggles aside and just jump in there so the teacher can see good practice as it should be done in their classroom. Their classroom is a living model of the work they're doing, and we need to be able to go in there and help them see those practices. We need to engage in observing and providing feedback. We always want to use objective information. It shouldn't be about what Teresa thinks should be occurring in the classroom. It shouldn't be what someone else thinks should be occurring in the classroom. When we use objective data, when we use evidence-based checklists, it takes away the kind of friction that exists between my opinion and your opinion and puts it on the research about what the research says should be occurring in the classroom. And then the last thing is support. As a coach, my goal is not to just show up in your classroom and help you think through a process, but when I leave that coaching meeting, there should be things that I'm accountable for as a coach. I should be helping you find resources. I should be helping you link you to things. There shouldn't be this gap between each meeting of my not engaging in some way to support that teacher. So I want to go through some tools that we've been using in coaching in the divisions I've been working with. And these are tools for the coaches. These are not tools for the teachers. But these tools have really, really helped us to be consistent and have a really systematic way of delivering coaching. So the first tool I'm going to talk about is something called the ICF Continuum. Then I'm going to talk about a collaborative log. I'm going to talk about some evidence-based checklists and then some training resources. So talking about the ICF Continuum, and this came from the new Teacher Center out of Santa Cruz. And I think this has been the most helpful resources and thought processes in my coaching experience. Our goal, once again, is to create autonomous teachers. We're working on shifting that locus of control from the coach to the teacher. When we engage in a coaching relationship, sometimes the teachers come to the table often in a manner of looking like resistance to change or resistance to applying the strategies that we're working with. One of the things with this continuum that has really, really helped me see is that the resistance to change is often masking not necessarily the lack of desire to change, but not knowing how to apply the procedures and do them in my classroom. And it's easier to say I don't want to do something rather than say, I really don't know what that looks like, Teresa. You've trained me on this, but I don't know how to apply it in the classroom. And this model has helped me to kind of navigate that kind of, can you self-reflect to, do I need to help you apply? So what we really start with is when I sit down in a coaching conversation with someone, I really start as a facilitator. My goal is to get a teacher to think about their own practice. So I'm engaging in questioning and summarizing to really pull from them what their lesson looked like and what they were thinking and how the students responded. But if I find out that the teacher's not able to really self-reflect on their practice, I'm going to move into more of a collaboration mode. I'm going to bring out, I saw you do this, but have you thought about doing it this way? Let's look at the lesson together and figure out if together we can revise it and change it to be something different. But oftentimes I find, even when sitting with a teacher and saying, I'm going to help you do it, that they still struggle. They may lean on me too much to kind of tell them where to go. If that's the case, what I'm saying is I might need to move towards more of an instructive model. And I kind of move down to, I've got to provide direct instruction. I might need to come in and actually create the lesson and model the lesson and then meet with the teacher to talk with them about what I did. And so this continuum helps me to kind of navigate when I'm engaged in a coaching relationship of where the teacher is related to practice and how I need to support them. So let me show you a document that you will have on the website under this PowerPoint. And this is kind of the conceptual framework for differentiated coaching. And here's the 3 levels. Our goal is move towards the right, which is that facilitative. That is the relationship we want in coaching. We want teachers to be able to come to the table, ready to have a conversation, and all I'm doing is listening and asking questions to help them guide them where they need to go. So if I start with facilitative, it's a self-reflection, asking questions. The teacher, not the coach, is actively directing, self-assessing, and self-prescribing. But if they're not there, I want to move down the continuum, and I may need to move towards more of a collaborative role. Here we're co-constructing and problem-solving together. So I might co-develop a lesson. I might say, let's bring your curriculum framework out and let's look at together and figure out next steps to go. We may problem solve issues. We may look at data together. I might graph the data and together we may sit out and make decisions. We may go observe another teacher together. Go observe what good practice looks like and then have a conversation around that. The last area is the instructive area. And this is where the coach really directs, provides, and offers suggestions and solutions. I find often this is the easiest thing for coaches to go to is that instructive model, where I'm just going to come in and show you what you need to do, kind of how to fix your classroom, and that does not work for teachers. We often need to start that facilitative, but very quickly in our conversation, I should be gauging where that teacher is. And as I'm engaging them in question asking, if I see them struggling, I've got to move down that continuum and not just look at it as resistance on the teacher's part, but really say, where's the performance breakdown? Maybe the performance breakdown is they really don't know how to perform the skill, and so therefore I need to help them learn how to perform that skill. And so this document really gives you some suggestions and activities that you can engage in when you think about this continuum of coaching. The other tool that we're using as coaches is a collaborative log. When we meet with teachers, we always have this with us, and it's a way for us to take some notes about our coaching conversation, and then a way for us to leave a document that kind of gives them reminders about things to do and what that coaching conversation was about. The collaborative log provides a lot of focus and clarity because it asks 4 questions, very simple, very succinct. It really gives some ongoing assessment data. It gives next steps and actions. It's accountability for the teacher and the coach. I talked about that earlier. When I leave a coaching conversation, I should be doing something. And that document reminds me. And then it gives us guidance. Because one of the worst things in a coaching conversation is going off on tangents. Very quickly, we can go off in a different direction. But this collaborative log keeps us pulling us back to the conversation around the practice we're looking at. So here's the collaborative assessment log, and this will be provided to you. The first area we look at is what's working. The teacher, as we're talking and we're saying, you know, how did your lesson go? What was working? What went well? We're just documenting all those accomplishments, those things that they say were just great. The kids were attending. They were engaged. You know, last week I did this lesson and the kids were able to write and they were able to read certain sentences. We're documenting that. We're starting with the positive. But as they're talking, you know, when you have a conversation, they start saying, you know, they were engaged, but. Those buts are what we're going to put in the next area, which is the current focus, challenges, and concerns. It's those things that they're seeing within their own practice that we need to have a conversation around. Yes, hey, they're doing great with the application and they're writing, but this person can't access the device. They need something else. So we're documenting what's working and challenges, and then we engage in a conversation. Okay, how are we going to change this? What are we going to do differently? So we really engage in the last 2 steps together. One is the teacher's next steps. From this coaching session to the next time we meet, what are those activities you need to engage in to kind of shift and change your practice? And then the last one is the coach's next steps. What are the things I need to do to support you as you engage in your next steps? And there really isn't ever a coaching session that we don't go away with something written in that next steps for coaches. It may be as simple as I'm available for email or I'm available to answer questions. The third thing that we look at is evidence-based practice checklists. We have checklists that provide us an objective tool to ensure implementation of practices. The checklist becomes an ongoing measurement tool for teachers over time. So the way we've set up our checklist, and I'm going to show you an example here, is there's multiple dates. And what we kind of do is we kind of give a score from 0 to 2. 2 meaning I see your practice pretty much at 90% of the time during observation. A 1 is, you know, you're doing it some, but you're not consistent. And a 0 means we didn't see this part of the practice in your lesson. And the things that teachers have learned is it's not an evaluative tool. It's not meant to be an evaluative tool, but it's meant to kind of gauge whether you're implementing evidence-based practices with fidelity. And there are two ways of doing checklists. One, you can develop them as a division, or you can use the National Professional Development Center's evidence-based briefs, and you will see that link on the PowerPoint. So I'm going to show you a checklist that we used in Wise County. One of the practices that we've been working on with teachers is in Airless Teaching. And this is a document that we created and we share with teachers. And there's actually 4 steps, and you can't see the other steps. It's on the second page. But the first step is identifying prerequisite skills and a plan for teaching. The next step is teaching the skill. The next step is data collection. And the last one is analyzing data. And so as we're observing, we're just kind of rating what we're seeing in the classroom. And then this becomes a tool during the coaching conversation for the teacher to self-reflect on their own practice. And then the last resource that's available to coaches are online training resources. Here are several that are here. VCU Autism Center offers webcasts and a variety of resources, Autism Internet modules, T-Tech Online, and then resources within your division. What I want to tell you is no matter what vehicle you use for training, you should immediately have a plan to follow up with coaching. We need to fold all training opportunities into that model of presentation, lecture, coaching, administrative feedback, and data collection. Any training we offer in a division should not be a separate initiative. All right. So now that you know a little bit about coaching and resources available, you're probably thinking, how can I apply this in my own division? I don't have individuals that I can set aside that can go into a classroom and actually work with teachers. So what I want to do is kind of share with you some resources that you can start with of ways to identify people in your own division that you can release to engage with other teachers. One of the first things that you can do to identify coaches within your division is identify those who have knowledge in autism or supporting students with disabilities. It is likely in your division that you have seasoned teachers that have been working with students with autism for many years, or you might have had someone who's gone through an autism certificate program. Identify those key people. One of the next things that you should think about is asking the staff to kind of complete a chart of current responsibilities. And this is what a chart might look like. One of the things we did in the 2 divisions that I've worked with is we met with a large number of teachers and we asked them to really just give us a rough estimate of all their responsibilities and then how much time within a year do they dedicate to those responsibilities. One of the things that we found out by doing this activity is that a lot of our teachers are engaged in a lot of activities that we can transfer over to someone else in the division. And by transferring some of these responsibilities over to somebody else, we release time. And that time that is released can be then applied to a coaching model. My colleague that is going to talk here in a little bit, one of the things that we identified with her time is that she was a VAP coordinator among many responsibilities. But what we were able to do is find a seasoned teacher that was very, very skilled in VAPs. She took over the VAP responsibility, which released Cindy to be able to really focus on coaching and working in classrooms. The next thing you want to do is really identify activities and practices that need to be addressed within your division. When we look at autism, it is overwhelming. There are so many things that could be done in a division that if we look at addressing everything, we won't get anything done. One of the great places to start is to really kind of have a division survey that teachers can complete. Once again, on the board, you will find a document that says Division Assessment Survey. And we've used this in our divisions. And it really gets teachers to look at kind of what is your overall goal for students? What are the things that you're doing to teach students? What are some of the barriers that you have to teaching students? Where do you need some more support? What are the barriers in your classroom, in your division, and your own practice? By getting teachers to do this, it starts giving you some qualitative information about things that may need to be changed in the division. You'll start to see commonalities of things that people are struggling with. But we don't want to just use qualitative data. We really want some quantitative data. One of the documents that is available for you to use that kind of to look at some informal assessments in the division is the effective implementation and support of Illinois' educational programs in autism. And it's a simple 2-page document that looks at kind of classroom behaviors, school-based behaviors, and division. What kind of supports are available at the classroom level? Do you like classroom arrangement? Are you using picture schedules? What do your instructional strategies look like? And then at the division, are there positive behavior supports as a school-wide plan? And then as a division, what are the supports and resources that are available to everyone? Using those two pieces of data, it will help you to kind of drive down what are those things that are important to your division. Working with those coaches that you've engaged in role release, start identifying those key practices. Start small. Don't look at everything in the division because it will become overwhelming. Look at a few very specific target practices that can impact all teachers, whether it might be just shifting their practice and making it just a little bit stronger, or you might have teachers that really need an extensive amount of support. Then your coaches can work within that specific area of expertise rather than trying to meet so many needs. And then your coaches need to provide support to those teachers on a monthly, at least a monthly basis. All right, so what I'd like to do is shift the presentation over to my colleague Cindy Bates, who's going to really talk about how we implemented a coaching model in Wise County Public Schools and really kind of changed the way of professional development and practice of teachers. So Cindy.
Hello everyone, my name is Cindy Bates and I am the Special Ed Coordinator and Autism Coordinator for Wise County Schools. When Teresa asked me to share about Wise County's experience with the coaching model, I was very excited about the opportunity. Our experience has been extremely positive. In fact, the coaching model has probably done more to improve the services for our students with autism than any other single support or training strategy that we have implemented. I'll begin just by telling you a little bit about what our model looked like before we implemented the coaching model. In Wise County, we're a rather rural area, so we don't have a whole lot of outside resources to support our schools services. So therefore, we are very committed to bringing in training to our teachers. I think we've done a very good job with that. We make sure our teachers have all up-to-date training, all up-to-date resources. I was assigned the role of the Autism Coordinator, and I began working to improve my skills, began working on my BCBA. There was just a lot of effort being put into doing what we could to make our services top-notch for our students. And even with all that in place, we weren't real satisfied with the consistency of services throughout our county. I found myself as the Autism Coordinator really putting out fires. I was running from one crisis to another. I told Teresa all I needed was a siren for my car as I ran from one crisis in the county to another, trying to help our teachers out and trying to give them the assistance and support that they needed. Our trainings, like I said, they were quality trainings, great information, always whatever was new in autism, and we had pockets of some really good things going on, but we didn't see, again, that consistency that we needed because our students were spread throughout our county. Most of our students were in included settings and had different case managers every year. So when we began to look at the needs in our county, the first thing we had to do was involve more staff. We knew that just one autism coordinator who had multiple jobs could not take care of all the training and the support that needed to happen in our county. So we began to look at what would our needs be. Well, obviously we needed more people involved, and of course with the economic times the way they are, adding another staff member was not an option. So we looked within our county of who did we have that we could use that was already in place. We identified actually 3 people who we felt could help out in this role because these people we felt had the skills, the knowledge, and the personalities that they could make good coaches. What made this an even better or an easier fit was that these people all were already in support roles in the county, so it was a real natural shift. Another thing that we had to have, of course, for this to happen is support from our central office and from administrators within the school system. Our central office, I can't say enough about how supportive they've been. Our director herself took on extra duties so that I could be freed up to have more time to spend as a coach. And of course, whenever anything is added to a system, everyone's plate is already full, so many responsibilities had to be shifted and rearranged. But we took care of that with that support that we needed. Okay. When we began to address our division needs, after we identified those people who could assist, we then started to assess our situation, where we were. Before we could really develop our goals, we needed to know where were we currently. So we chose an assessment that we had used in a previous grant that we were very happy with, Autism Program Environmental Rating Scale. This was a very involved assessment that included interviews with staff, interviews with parents, very structured observations, surveys completed by teachers and staff. After completing this assessment, we felt we had a good idea of our strengths and our weaknesses and our needs. In fact, after this assessment, it kind of changed the focus of our coaching. We'd kind of gone into it thinking we knew where our weaknesses and our needs were, but we actually revealed some areas that we hadn't expected to be weaknesses through the assessment. So we were real pleased that we had done that in the beginning of our coaching. Next, we had to look at how can we get this information to all the areas that we needed it to be in, which was every school in our county. So we identified some teachers within the school that we wanted to be our leads within their own home school with those autism services and resources. We named these our autism resource teachers, or our ART teachers is what we refer to them now. Some of these teachers happened to already have autism certificates, which was great. Others were just teachers that we had noticed their skill level and felt that they would be great resources for the other teachers in their schools. We had 4 coaches total in our county that were identified, myself and 3 other people. And one of those was our school psychologist. She was in a role of managing and kind of monitoring and supervising our preschool program. So it fit very well for her to be the coach for our preschool program. We had a behavior specialist who worked on a certain end of the county, and she continued her work there. And then we had a transition coordinator who worked primarily in the high schools, so that it fit very well for her to take over coaching to our high school teachers. And how we delivered the coaching, we had several planned activities that we were very consistent about. For example, we tried to meet with our coaching, with the individuals that we were coaching at least monthly. Now, there were lots of communications in between those meetings, lots of just drop-ins. If we were in the schools, that we'd just drop in to see how things were going with the teachers. We had constant email contact, phone calls. We were there for them as they needed us, but we also had scheduled times that we would meet with them. We also found that meeting with them as a group was very, very helpful, because when we met, everyone kind of shared where they were with implementing certain strategies. They kind of shared about what problems they had encountered and shared their celebrations, and we found this to be a real good time for the teachers within the school to support each other. We as coaches met monthly to kind of make sure that we were all on the same page, to make sure that our staff members that we were working with were progressing at the same rate, and also to share about things that we thought we might need to improve. So talking more about how we delivered coaching across the division, there were certain trainings that we did have that all teachers were involved in. We didn't do away with those group trainings. It's just that we followed up each of those trainings with intensive coaching. So we continued to do trainings for all teachers on certain initiatives, such as goal writing, data collection, data analysis and decision making based on our data analysis. And we also had started having monthly meetings between certain groups of teachers where we could follow up on that training in between the coaching sessions, and we felt this was very, very helpful. It started out with our self-contained teachers. We only have self-contained classrooms in 6 schools of our county. So each of these teachers is the only self-contained classroom in their entire school, so they really don't have a support group within their school. So we felt it was very important to bring those teachers together at least monthly so they could talk about some of the problems they were encountering. They could share their celebrations. We even have them bring in videos from things that they're doing in their classrooms and sharing it with each other. This has been a great asset, I think, for those teachers, and that we've gotten great feedback about it. They feel very good about that opportunity to kind of bounce ideas off of each other and share with their colleagues. So that was going so well that later we decided to bring our art teachers, that's our autism resource teachers, together monthly as well, because that gave them that opportunity to share what was going on in each school and to bring ideas that they had found successful to other teachers. So we felt this was a great addition to the actual coaching that we did in the schools, to bring this group of people, these leaders that we had together to share on a regular basis also. Again, we were very interested in having the right supports we needed within the school, and we began with the art teachers, but we also wanted to get the administrators involved because we felt like those self-contained teachers and those art teachers were going to need the support of the administrators to really implement what they needed to within the schools, and to have to make sure there's someone there to monitor the programs that we were, or the initiatives that we were implementing. So we trained our principals. We did a training with them on a checklist that they could use to evaluate teachers in self-contained classroom. This was an area that they felt they didn't really have the skills or knowledge to do effectively. So we spent some time actually training them, and then once again our coaching went into place, and we went with them to evaluate self-contained teachers, and we actually worked with them through the evaluation, and so that they felt that they had received the coaching that they needed. Again, we will be there with them, for them for continued support, because they will need coaching just as well as everyone else. Another area that we had to address certain needs were our focus groups. We actually identified certain committees or groups to work on specific areas that we had identified that we needed some resources for. We got together during the summer with a group of really strong teachers and did some IEP goal writing. This was something our teachers had mentioned over and over again that they felt they needed as a resource. You know, we were learning to write goals completely differently than we had in the past. And the teachers kept saying, we just need more examples. We need for you to show us more examples of how to write these goals. So we got together and spent a couple of days over our summer just writing goals for different grade levels, for different skill areas, for different behaviors. And we came up with about 45 really well-written goals that could be adapted for many different students. And the teachers said this was a very, very helpful resource for them. We also, through our coaching, had identified some areas of weakness that we felt we needed to address that was kind of outside of just the area of autism, and that was some weaknesses in our basic curriculum in our self-contained classrooms. Our self-contained classrooms are spread throughout the county, and though our teachers were doing a great job, we didn't have any kind of continuity in our curriculum. So we decided we would look at some curriculum for those teachers so that they would have better resources in their instruction. There again, we had a focus group to do that during the summer. Another area that we really wanted to improve was our transitioning, not just between high school and the work world, but between schools and even between grade levels. Most of our 50 students that have been identified with autism are in included settings, so they have a different case manager every year of their school experience. So we really needed careful transition planning for these students. So we developed a transition notebook that we'll be implementing this spring that included all the information that we felt a case manager would need to know about a student as they move from one grade level to another. This includes detailed information about their behavioral concerns, their medical concerns, their learning needs, their communication needs. Every area that we thought that would be helpful to those teachers is included in that one notebook that will follow those students. We're hoping to start with their very first IEP and throughout their school experience. A fourth focus group that we had was our evidence-based practices group. This was a group that met to design a quick reference guide for teachers on evidence-based practices. We did quick one-pagers on each of the evidence-based practices that we identified that we felt were most important for our district to have access to. And each of those one-pagers also linked them to other resources where they can get more information. But what we felt was most helpful is we tried to organize those evidence-based practices one-pagers according to where we felt that they would be most helpful to the teachers. For instance, we just listed some of the common concerns that teachers who are working with students with autism have, and then under each of those concerns, we listed possible evidence-based practices that could be used to address those concerns. We felt this would be a quick reference for teachers. They could turn right to that if they're having difficulty with transitions. They could turn right to that part of the reference guide and look for what evidence-based practices that they could implement that would be helpful for this particular problem. Our last group, our focus group, is focusing on assessments. This was an area that we identified that we needed to improve in our county. We needed to give our teachers more options that they could use to assess their students in areas beyond just academics. So when we are completed with this, when we have completed this project, we'll have a list of assessments that will be mandatory for our teachers to use with students with autism, and then some other options that they may implement as they feel that they need to. Of course, all of this coaching also involved a lot of new materials that the teachers needed, and you do have to be willing to invest in some resources. We had to purchase protocols for our teachers. The VB map was a big focus for our self-contained and our preschool teachers, so this involved a little bit of expense. We also found that the teachers, a real barrier for the teachers were just having the materials they needed to do some of the assessments and some of the teaching strategies that we talked about. So we actually put some of our vocational programs to work. We have several vocational programs for our students with disabilities, and these students really enjoy doing things like printing and cutting and laminating and Velcroing for us. So we actually had our students producing VB map assessment kits for our teachers, and then later that kind of moved into they were producing visual schedules for our teachers, visual supports for our teachers. So as the way we have it set up now, our teachers can email the teacher from these programs and say, look, you know, I need a visual schedule with the following icons in this size. Can you have your students produce that for me? And they get it all done for the teacher and then just put it in an envelope and send it to them at their school. So that's been a great help to our teachers, because sometimes one of the barriers of implementing new strategies is just having the time to create the materials that you need to implement that strategy. So we really heard our teachers when they said that and tried to provide those supports for them. We invested in some new literacy and math curriculums, some social skills curriculums, assistive technologies. We're still working on that to bring that to where we want it to be. And basically some toolkits that we thought every art teacher needed to have, with just some of your core basic visual supports that they could just grab real quickly for a teacher who had a need. We also found it helpful to provide our teachers with sample data forms when we were doing our instruction on data collection. You know, they were like, we're willing to do this, but we just don't know where to start. So we just gave them some sample forms. And from that, I have seen teachers feel more confident about developing their own forms. It was just having those samples really helped to jumpstart that. Graphing programs. I can't say enough about the wonderful graphing programs that Teresa brought to us. I was very excited about that because there again is another barrier. If you're not really comfortable with Excel, graphing data can sometimes be, you know, a challenge. So Teresa brought to us some wonderful graphing programs that really simplified that for our teachers. And I've already talked a little bit about our monthly meetings that brought like just a natural community of learning and practice for within our county. Oh, another thing that was very, very helpful that we found for all of our teachers was just to give them timelines of when we expected things to be done and when we would be looking at those things and monitoring those things. It was just almost overwhelming, all the different things we had going on at one time. So we felt it was helpful to them for us to really organize what we expected when in reasonable timelines so that they could kind of focus on one thing at a time instead of just, I think, being overwhelmed by all that they had out there that they were working on at once. So we would kind of relieve that anxiety by saying, this is what we need from you in the month of September. And then this is what we need from you in the month of October. We also found that just giving them a little bit at a time like that of the timeline was very helpful. And we would discourage them from looking at the whole picture and go, you know, don't look at all of this that you're going to have to do by the end of the year. Right now we want you to focus on, we want this, this, and this done by the end of September so that we can go our next step on coaching you in this area. And that was really helpful to the teachers. And I would encourage you, if any time that you're working with teachers with so many different things that you want to accomplish, to kind of help them to break that down into doable steps. Okay. I think Teresa's going to take over now and wrap up with you and talk to you about some of the lessons that we learned in this experience, and I'll turn it over to Teresa.
All right, so Cindy really talked about how Wise County has really implemented the coaching model, and she's talked about all the initiatives, and the number of initiatives is overwhelming, and the recognition is that they've had the ongoing support to really implement all the different self-contained teachers, art teachers, meeting with administrators. But the underlying thing through every initiative in Wise County is that coaching has been integrally involved with it. The coaches have been involved in every single initiative, so there's continuity and consistency and really systematic program. Everything linked together. Nothing was done separate from one another. The coaching teams always stayed the same, whether they were involved in one initiative or two initiatives. The coach that worked with each site was consistent. So I want to kind of talk about some of the lessons that we've learned as we've engaged in coaching. One of the things is I've received training in the past about being a coach and read some of the literature. They really talk about coaching being a kind of dyadic relationship between a coach and an educator, really two people sitting down and have a conversation. What's nice about a kind of that relationship of two people, or even three, kind of being a small relationship, is we can go see live practice and we can see practice going on, and it's really difficult to bring a team of people to someone's classroom to observe. And so there is a role for just one-on-one conversations in a coaching relationship. It really that allows you to see practice live, and teachers need that. They need to build that relationship with one person. It allows for live feedback, modeling, and then support as the action unfolds. As a coach, I mentioned earlier, you've got to be willing to jump in and really model lessons, and you need that within a small relationship. But one of the things that Cindy referenced in her presentation about WISE was that this shift in our coaching has occurred, and that we've learned that coaching is also valuable when delivered to a team of educators. One of the things that I've seen in coaching with just one-on-one, or when we focus on a specific practice or a specific student, is that our teachers aren't easily able to generalize the skills they've learned when talking about one student to the 10 other students in the classroom or the 15 other students on their caseload. But what I've learned is when we actually bring a team of educators around to talk about very specific practices, where they bring videotapes of them implementing a practice, where we look at data together, where we have discussions about multiple students, where we graph data together, where we analyze data, that the teachers are actually engaging in conversations about multiple behaviors, multiple students, multiple scenarios. And I'm seeing that they're able to more easily generalize the skills that we're working on to many situations and many behaviors. And that's been a big aha for me in that coaching experience. And so it's as you negotiate as you're coaching which relationship fits the initiative that you're working on. You don't want to move away from that one-on-one coaching because that is necessary to really change practice at the classroom level. But there is value of bringing a team of people together and having a common conversation. As Cindy alluded to, one of the biggest things that's really happened as bringing teachers together and coaching together is we've created a natural community of practice within each local school site. One of the initiatives that Cindy's referred to was the IEP goal writing, data collection, graphing, and analysis. You know, it's one of the things that I don't really need to go in and sit beside you as you're taking data with a student. But I need to be able to help you pinpoint the behavior. I need to be able to help you kind of see what data to collect, when to collect data, and then how to use it to make decisions. We've done that as an entire school team where we've met with a whole team, and every teacher in the building that's a special ed teacher comes to the table and we actually brainstorm together. What's really been neat about that is teachers have gone, this is really good. I'm learning about a student I'm going to get next year. I'm learning all the behaviors and what I need to address. And it's really created this, we're watching out for each other's kids. Oh, I see that kid in my class. I can take data for you rather than the data being the responsibility of the case manager. And it really has created nice collegial relationships, and the coaching, I think, has been extreme value to those teams. So this is kind of a slide that kind of goes through that, but really, once again, the teachers are able to apply those procedures across multiple behaviors and scenarios. And the other thing is within coaching, when we have that kind of dyadic relationship, typically it's the coach providing feedback to the teacher. But when I have 3 or 4 teachers there, they're all being trained to look at behavior among each other. And they're learning how to provide feedback, not critical feedback, but really feedback that changes our practice. Feedback that really gets us to really look very detailed. And I'm finding that in a team coaching relationship, the quality of questions that are coming out because we're looking at one another's data and looking at things through a different lens has really shifted the thinking. The locus of control is now in that team and not the coaches coming in. And we're finding that they're sending us data, or one teacher sharing data forms with the other teacher, or one teacher sitting down and showing the teacher how to graph it. They're supporting one another, where that is really the idea of coaching, is it's not always going to be us coming in, but the team as a whole is supporting one another. So I want to give a big caution and talk about generalization really, really quick here as I'm wrapping up. One of the lessons that we really learned within coaching, because of so many initiatives that we've put in place, we've had a couple initiatives that were very, very new to both of the divisions I'm working with, particularly at looking at some practices around applied behavior analysis and verbal behavior that these divisions may not have been applying in a systematic way that they are doing now. And because of that, our tendency was to have teachers focus on one student or one scenario to learn how to use this assessment tool and to learn how to apply those principles. And what we've learned is because we focus on one student, we kind of fell into that kind of train and hope. In other words, I train you to do this with one student, and I hope you can generalize it to other students on your caseload. And what we found out is it's not been that easy for teachers because it's been a new philosophy and a new way of approaching assessment and instruction. And so what we really had to come to terms with is how can we get teachers to really look at these tools and applying them in different ways. And that's where we're working with teachers to really identify multiple students and to start applying these assessments to look at multiple students and multiple behaviors rather than honing in on one particular student. So really make sure when you're working on coaching to really plan for generalization. We do it with our kids, we need to do it with our coaches, with our teachers that we're coaching. So there's 2 questions. If you look at the Trevor Stokes and the Stokes and Bear article, so I'm going to start over. If you look at the Stokes and Bear article from 1977, which is an implicit technology of generalization, one of my colleagues, one of the coaches that I'm working with, reminded me of this article, and as I'm reading it, it is reminding me of what we need to think about within our coaching experience. going back to that train and hope, I think that's where we kind of started, and we really found out when coaching that was not working. And what we really learned is we've got to kind of train that sufficient exemplars. And that's where that team coaching has really come in to be really helpful. We're looking at multiple students, multiple skill sets. We're observing one another doing practice. We're taking video of one another doing practice. So we're being exposed to many students using the procedures that we're teaching, which is really transferring into them being able to generalize those skills to new students, new behaviors, and new skill sets. The other thing is, in that article, they talk about what are those natural maintaining contingencies for teachers. We talk about that for students. How do they kind of elicit reinforcement from their community? And one of the things that we have found is the natural maintaining contingency for teachers is their community of practice. It is the teachers they work with. It is that teacher, when we've done some coaching around guided reading, that had an outside person come in and look at the literacy materials that teacher is using and say, you're doing a great job. And that teacher comes to the monthly meeting and says, this person says I'm doing a great job. She liked my materials. And everybody's patting that person on the back and saying, you did a great job. Let me see your book. Let me use it. They're eliciting reinforcement from their community. That's what we want here, is we want to make sure we provide opportunities where they're connecting with their own professional community. The other thing is a natural maintaining contingency is the administrators are involved. By developing this checklist and including the administrators in meetings and teachers, now the administrators are not now coaching meetings, but they're involved in other meetings where we're looking at initiatives and timelines. But making them very aware of what's going on in the classroom has shifted administrators to now going in classrooms and asking to see data, asking to see notebooks, show me your goals, show me instruction. And it's really changed the teacher's perspective of, ooh, now I have this level of autonomy. It has really kind of risen that bar of quality in their programs and improving skill sets. So I want to kind of wrap up and just kind of remind you about coaching, or remind myself about coaching. And what I want you to really know, and I talked about vulnerability, is part of the vulnerability of being a coach is recognizing what you don't know and what you can't bring to the table when a question's asked of you. And as a coach, you've got to be willing to say, you know what, I don't know that answer now, but I'll find it out for you. And that is hard sometimes, because sometimes we engage in a consultant role where we should be the expert, and the coaching role is not to be the expert, but to be a colleague working together. And so as a coach, we need to recognize our work is that we are engaged in an ongoing professional development activity, not for just the coaches, but for ourselves. We've got to be aware of our own skill sets. We've got to seek support from others where we're weak. We've got to develop skills in those areas that are not strong for us. We, as coaches, have to receive feedback and coaching from others that are more skilled in practice. And then we have to be a model of what we expect others to be. If I expect teachers to be self-reflective, to self-assess and self-prescribe, I've got to do the same. I've got to be comfortable with looking at Cindy at the end of her coaching session and say, what do I need to change about my practice? What did not work? Do I need to do something differently? What do I need to do differently? The coaches that I work with do the same thing with me. Teresa, what do I need to change? What do I need to learn? So it's that ongoing conversation. Those monthly meetings where we get together as a team allows us to say, you know what, I need some more resources. I don't know where to go. Can you help me fill this gap in? So our coaches have their own community of practice. We are supporting one another. So I want to wrap up with this last quote. And that the biggest thing for a coach is what they recognize is they may not like this, but they really are leaders for change. And we may not assume a leadership role in the administration of our schools or our divisions, but by the very work of us mentoring and working with teachers, we are leaders of change in practice. And I found this quote from David Gergen from 1942, and I think it really shares what we should be thinking about as coaches. A leader's role is to raise people's aspirations for what they can become and to release their energy so they will try to get there. We have to have high expectations. We've got to display high expectations to those we're coaching, but we just can't ask them to achieve without giving them the tools and the resources that go together. And when we have high expectations and we marry it to giving you the supports, the resources, the administrative support, the role release to do that job, our teachers will rise to that occasion. And I've seen that in both of the divisions that I'm working with. So I want to thank you for participating in this presentation, and I hope you learned something good about coaching. Thank you.